What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. I'm Daniel Oyefusi. That is David Neal. Thanks so much for tuning in. Quick reminder before we start, make sure to subscribe to the Miami Herald YouTube page, like, share, comment, as well as subscribe to the Miami Herald.
There, that one, really. Yeah.
We are a week into Dolphins training camp. The Dolphins just held their sixth training camp practice on Tuesday. They got an off day on a Wednesday ahead of getting back to work on Thursday. We're a couple of days away from the team's stadium practice, which should be pretty interesting. A change of pace. They've been practicing at the Baptist Health Training Complex. They're about to head over a couple of yards over to Hard Rock Stadium and practice in the stadium, their stadium, for the first time this summer. But we've got a lot to get into. A lot has happened since we last spoke, previewing training camp storylines. What we thought we might be talking about a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now is not what we're talking about today, just 7 days removed from that podcast, a week into training camp. We've had major injury developments, both good and bad for the Dolphins.
How many minutes did we spend on Terron Armstead last week?
Yeah, we spent like 20 minutes on Terron Armstead, and five days later, he's back at practice.
Big deal. Yeah.
So
we could have, like you said, we could have spent 2 minutes on it.
Yeah, so all good there. However, the Dolphins did have a major injury development just 2 days into the start of training camp. You've probably heard of it. If you haven't, you've been living under a rock. But star cornerback Jalen Ramsey, the Dolphins' top offseason acquisition, goes down with a meniscus injury. Second day of camp, had to be carted off the field toward the end of practice. He underwent surgery, a full meniscus repair for that knee injury, and he is out indefinitely. Now, reports say that he could be out until December. Mike McDaniel said that he didn't give a clear timetable for his return, but said he's working diligently with the training staff to try to come back as soon as possible. By all accounts, it seems like Ramsey is going to be sidelined until late in the season. So obviously a really big blow to a defense that entered training camp with high expectations. However, David J. Neal, his first Dolphins training camp practice that he attended this year, he got a good, the Dolphins left a good first impression in terms of the defense. The defense left a strong first impression in what I called one of the most dominant defensive training camp practices I've seen since I joined the beat. So I'm going to let David kind of take the lead here. What did you see from that unit and what was a very impressive day, the first training camp practice on Friday post Ramsey injury?
I saw they couldn't seem to block Christian Wilkins or Bradley Chubb, and
or Jalen Phillips or David Long.
But Christian Wilkins was letting them know about it as they're failing to block him. He was after he was failing to block them.
He had some choice words. So the Dolphins practice inside, which does allow us, we watch kind of perched up high. From that
not that high.
I was gonna say high, but not that high. So allows us to kind of hear some of the interactions. And Christian Wilkins, one of the more is it loquacious personalities? Is that the right word?
Yeah,
he had a lot of choice words for the Dolphins offense as he was kind of giving them the business.
He was telling them about themselves and what they were and weren't doing. And Bradley Chubb's running around out there looking like he was like the dude who dots the I in the script Ohio at times. He was he was happy because he was stuffing the run and he was, rushing the passer well also. And there were a lot of good defensive back play actually also. And there weren't a lot of, I think there were like one or two passes really
completed. Yeah, it was that bad for the Dolphins offense.
And it's a training camp practice.
First one practice, yeah.
And the thing about defense, it takes less so today with offense, being as much of a passing offense as NFL offenses are these days. There's less, honestly, 2 or 3 guys can make a big play, whereas on defense, it takes 1 guy and you can blow the whole mess up.
But this is a new defense though that's being installed with Vic Fangio. So I mean, and conversely, it's the second year for the Dolphins offense.
Right,
So
but the Dolphins offense looked like it was the first time they were seeing that defense ever. It looked like
they've had some struggles against it for sure.
they look like, they look like they brought that defense from Neptune, and the Dolphins were like, had the Scooby-Doo look about them, So yeah, it wasn't a great performance, but it was a training camp practice. It was one training camp practice, a snapshot. And I I hear the offense was much better.
Yeah.
Which the team social media definitely made sure to point out. They made sure to show you highlights from the next few days, so fans wouldn't think, oh my goodness, are we going to be back to the Dave Wannstedt like days of trying to win games 17-14? And so look, the Jalen Ramsey injury is, it definitely breaks up for now what should be one of the top three cornerback duos, if not the best cornerback duo in the NFL.
Yeah.
And if you have a top-notch cornerback duo these days, and you have somebody who can play inside, and you have a Bradley Chubb and a Christian Wilkins who can create havoc inside and then create room for other people to mess everybody's program up, you've got a lot going on there. Well, yes, they'll say, okay, this creates opportunities for other people to step up. Well, yes, it does. But the Dolphins were looking at, Jalen Ramsey in that spot, banking on that he was going to be the Jalen Ramsey who was in Jacksonville, or maybe even the Jalen Ramsey just a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
and they're banking on Xavier Howard, being the Xavier Howard of a couple of years ago. So while that's still possible, the Ramsey part isn't there. So I don't think this cripples the defense at all, but it definitely takes it down a notch. And this is but this defense,
pieces are in place for
yeah,
sure.
there's a lot going on. There's a lot very good about this defense. And if they can get performances up to where you look at these guys, you don't have to have a bunch of guys having career years. You just have to have the right guys doing what
Their
they do
job.
well.
Yep.
And again, those guys are, I think, it's Christian Wilkins, Bradley Chubb, Xavier Howard,
Jalen Phillips, third year, outside
Phillips,
linebacker.
Phillips.
He's really the guy who a lot of people are saying he's going to be like a Pro Bowl potential All Pro guy if he matches kind of like if all the physical tools kind of click with just like the mental side. He's the guy that a lot of people are saying could be the best player on the defense potentially.
And if those guys, if you have the key guys doing what they do, normally, then the other guys, just need to take advantage of all these opportunities and everything that's going to fall their way, and you'll be okay. And this should be a very, very good defense. And the Dolphins should be able to flat out outscore teams. And this sets up a kind of defense that, the perfect kind of very good modern defense, where if you're the Dolphins, you get, big play with Tyreek or big play with Waddle, or, you get a couple of big plays, you score quickly, and just psychologically that screws with people. It doesn't matter that, okay, that's one score. It's like,
you got to go down and score again, because if you don't, they can score in a hurry, and now you're down two scores.
And people people get real uneasy. The NFL, coaches get uneasy, quicker than I think in college football. Maybe it's because they have, fewer plays, less time, something. But boy, they get down 7, and they're like, they act like they're down 70, and and I honestly think it's going to take like another generation before that cycles out of NFL coaches. And you're going to get some guys who are used to, like, okay, look, we're down 10, so we still have to score. We still have to score. We still have to stop them. This has not changed. But the Dolphins have that kind of defense where they get up, the other teams are like, oh my goodness, we got to keep up, and that puts them into the kind of game that plays right to the Dolphins' defense strengths.
Yeah.
And That definitely can happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
mean,
still can happen.
again, Friday was, and it was clear talking to, McDaniel players. So Ramsey addressed the team after his injury, before the news came out. He kind of wanted to let them know what the deal was, that he was going to be out for some time. And McDaniel said that what he said to his teammates, his defensive team, specifically his cornerback room, really resonated with them and moved them. And several players after Friday's practice, defensive players were saying, "Hey, we wanted to kind of send a message. We wanted to play hard for Ramsey." In the past practices, Tuesday notwithstanding, is really showed that talent. I think that there was maybe a little bit of an overreaction. Obviously, post Ramsey injury. Obviously, when you lose a player of that caliber, it's gonna kind of put a damper on moods. But it wasn't that like Ramsey was gonna change life for this defense. I mean, the entire kind of, I want to say narrative, but the thing about this defense was that I think the widespread belief was that they underachieved last year relative to their talent. So, it wasn't that, oh, this one player is going to change life for the defense. Obviously, Ramsey is one of the best, arguably the best cornerback in the NFL. The things he can do outside, inside, and kind of the versatility was something that, a lot of people were looking forward to, and you're not going to have that. And I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a trickle down effect because now they have to find a guy to replace him. It looks like Kader Kohu, their second-year player, is their projected slot corner. So they need somebody outside. They just signed Eli Apple. They have Cam Smith, the top rookie from this year that's been looking good. Noah Igbenogany, who's, has had some early career struggles. He's looked pretty solid. Like, I think the best thing you can say about a cornerback is that they're not getting targeted and, they're not getting beat. And he hasn't really been getting beat too very much in team drill. So, I think that's been a positive training camp for him. There's a little bit of a trickle down effect, and they do need one of those young guys to step up. I think Kohu is like a solidified starter. He started 13 games, albeit as an undrafted rookie, but he's a bona fide starter as far as I'm concerned. They need one more cornerback to step up. If it's Cam Smith, if it's Eli Apple, if it's Noah Igbenogany, maybe it's somebody down the road. They need somebody to step up. I think they're good at cornerback until Ramsey comes back, whenever that is. And then obviously, I think kind of one of the more underlying questions and kind of things that people haven't really talked much about is that Xavier Howard didn't have, and he's admitted he did not have a season that was up to his standard last year. So I think we're kind of just assuming that he's going to be back to all pro form, but still we have to see it. We have to see him elevate his level to that play. And I think one of the things with Ramsey coming back, and especially with Ramsey coming into the fold and the defense that they were going to be playing, is that, all right, there wasn't going to be so much pressure on Xavier Howard. But now Howard kind of is relegated back, or steps back into that number one role for sure. So he's going to have to kind of, sometimes follow the number one cornerback. So we do need to see him get back to that all-pro level. But like you said, all the talk about the Dolphins defense was the secondary, but the defensive front is really the group that I think is the most deep. Like even before the Ramsey injury, they have the most depth, especially the defensive front. Like you said, Jalen Phillips, Christian Wilkins, Zach Sealer, Bradley Chubb, all those guys, like they have a multitude of guys who can disrupt the game in the pass game and the running game. And we saw that even David Long, who was, I think, an under the radar signing from Tennessee because, he got a 2-year, $11 million, like he got a 2-year, $11 million deal. It wasn't one of those big money signings. And obviously it came after Ramsey, so nobody talked about it. But he's been one of their best defensive players the past couple of days in terms of, sideline to sideline speed, being able to do things in the run in the pass game. Like they have a lot of talent. And, Durham Smythe, their tight end, even said, I think we have the best defensive front, linebackers, defensive linemen in the NFL. There's some teams that, you could say San Francisco, some other teams could, have a say in that matter. But the Dolphins defense is definitely up there. So I think that, again, I think there's a trickle down effect because obviously you have to replace a player of that caliber, and whoever ends up taking Ramsey snaps, they're not going to be Jalen Ramsey. So there's going to be a trickle down effect. But maybe if they're not if the projection was, they're a top 5 unit, maybe they're a top 10 unit. That's still a marked improvement from what they were last year. I still do expect them to be a top 10 unit. Like I don't expect there to be a massive drop off because it's not like Ramsey was overcompensated. It's not like Ramsey made up the entire defense, and it's like the defense revolved around him. I think that they have a lot of guys that you said can impact the game, especially if you have an offense that's scoring a lot of points. The way this defense is set up, It's set up to make offenses, make when quarterbacks make mistake. And again, like you said, if you're up 7-0, 10-0, 14-0, you're playing a lot of zone. You're not giving a lot of open looks to quarterbacks. You kind of force them to make some aggressive throws and to force some things in there, and then maybe you're able to capitalize off those mistakes. I still expect this to be a top unit. Is there going to be a top 5 unit? I'm not sure about that, but I expect them to still be significantly better than they were last year, even without Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, and also if you're going to have an injury on a defense, and a defense that has quality at each level, I honestly would rather be the cornerback because
I don't know. The Dolphins had a lot of injuries
well,
last year to cornerback. We saw how that
no,
played out.
I'd rather be there because I'd rather if you ask me, okay, which would you rather have, like the blanket, the blanket coverage, the great corner, or would you rather have the great guy rushing the passer?
Okay, I see that. I see
I
that.
want that. Hey, the Giants took down the 2007 Patriots because they
They're a
could rush
great
the
pass
passer.
rush, yeah.
Because they could rush the passer, and that's the only way that team was going to get beat, was the teams that could really, really, really rush the passer. And it's not every team in the NFL is the 2007 Patriots, but every team in the NFL is almost every team in the NFL is throwing the ball all over the place. With the exception of maybe Philly. You got a few other teams that run the ball as a major part of their offense, but I mean major part of their offense. That's their offense works off that. Most teams, the offense works off the pass. Whether it's going downfield, going sideline to sideline, one way or the other, it's working off the pass. I'd rather have the pass rush these days. I want pass rush. And and the Dolphins still have that. And so yeah, I don't I does this injury hurt them a little bit, but yeah, I think they're gonna be fine. And now we hope, we think, and let's see how it plays out, not just in the preseason, but we're not really, really gonna know anything until this stuff gets real.
Yeah. Again, out indefinitely. NFL Network reported that he's out until December. McDaniel didn't give a timetable, but we did see, he actually was at practice today. He was on crutches, but talking to some of his teammates watching practice, McDaniel said he's extremely invested in not only this rehab, but returning to the team and this team as a whole. I think that was a sign of that. So that was a pretty cool sight. Seeing him at practice on the field, and again, several months away from his return. But he said he's attacking his rehab, so we'll see, how the defense holds up without him in the coming weeks and months.
I'm sure he is attacking his rehab. He's number one. He's an athlete, but another thing, he's a prideful man.
Yeah, very
And
prideful.
what he put on film last year was not what he wants the last film of Jalen Ramsey to be. So I'm quite sure he's busting butt to get back in December and be part of a possibly a team possibly making a deep playoff run.
That's what he said. He said the late season push is going to be legendary.
And also breaking this, for players a lot of times don't care about history, don't but they're tired of hearing have not won a playoff game in
2
some of their
decades.
lifetimes. So I'm
Yeah.
sure they're just going to okay, look, let's do this and get this out of the way so they can stop asking us about it, stop talking about it, and the organization can move forward.
Yeah. Ramsey, like you said, Ramsey is definitely still a very prideful player, one of the most confident players. The day before the Dolphins open training camp, he spoke to the media, and he corrected a lot of media he corrected one media member that said he's one of the best corners. He said, "No, I am the best corner." So he's definitely going to want to get back to the field as soon as possible and prove that to be true. All right, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back on the other side of things, we're a week into training camp. How was Tua Tagovailoa looked? He spoke to the media day. He spoke about a lot of things, how the offense is going, plans for the preseason possibly. So also the benefits of his jiu-jitsu training. He's kind of already reaping some rewards. We're going to talk about Tua in the second half of things. But stay locked with us, and we'll be back soon. What's going on, everybody? Still here on the Dolphins In Depth podcast with David Neal, talking about all things Dolphins. Now, in the first half, we were focusing on the defense, which is still adjusting to the loss of all-pro cornerback Jalen Ramsey. But we're going to shift over to the offensive side of the football, where it's kind of been a up and down, kind of back and forth performance for the Dolphins offense. Obviously, they're going up against a very talented defense, as we mentioned before. But Tuesday, the Dolphins' sixth practice was, in my opinion, Dolphins' best showing on offense, particularly for starting quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. I will say it feels like entering his fourth season. It's been kind of a quiet camp for him, and I think that I say that in kind of like I believe that's a good thing. You know, last year there was a lot of noise, a lot of questions. Can he complete the deep ball to Tyreek? Is he an actual starting quarterback? And I feel like the relative normalcy of his training camp is kind of reflective of and kind of a testament to his standing as, you know, what I would say as a bona fide starting quarterback. Like, I don't know if there are a lot of people questioning whether he can play or whether he's a starter. For the most part, it's just about his health.
It is.
Now,
Questioning whether you're gonna be there.
exactly. But, you know, he's been there for each training camp practice. Again, I thought he looked very, very good today. It was actually a very productive day for all of the Dolphins headlining stars on offense, not only Tua, but Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. I will say that because this time last year, we had a lot of clips and videos of Tyreek catching long balls from Tua kind of snapping back at the media and his critics saying, "Oh, I looked nice to me," with the little over the catch motion. But I described in my story that you can check up on the Miami Herald website, I described the start to training camp as a workmanlike. I've mentioned this several times, but I think that these set of summer sessions are going to be some of the most impactful for Tua because of the defense that he's going up against. We know that Vic Fangio is one of the best defensive minds in the NFL, the Dolphins' new defensive coordinator, and he's had a scheme that Tua has frankly struggled with a lot in his first 4 years of his career, first 3 years of his career, I'll say. You know, a lot of people remember, I believe, his rookie year facing the Broncos when Vic Fangio was the head coach and defensive play caller. That was one of his worst games of his career. We asked him about that back in spring, about what he remembers about that game. He said, "I remember getting hit a lot. Didn't really know what I was doing out there." And at times we've kind of seen not only him, but the entire offense struggle. You know, we talked about that Friday practice where it seemed like they couldn't even complete a pass. That's how, you know, aggressive and confusing this defense is. But again, I think Tuesday was his best practice by far. Really looked comfortable. And again, it's always good when you see him connecting with Tyreek and Jalen. And he spoke about kind of the benefit of, you know, these practices and how he looks at it, because from the media and kind of the outside perspective, it's like, all right, the offense won this day, the defense won this day. It was 50-50, 60-40. He said this. I would say the way we look at it is not result based. It's basically letting everyone finish with whatever technique they got. So regardless of whether the play was a sack, our defense gives us the opportunity to continue to read it out, to extend plays. It also gives the guys on the back end an opportunity to continue to play within a broken down play. Or if a quarterback escapes the pocket, they're going to have to move around and maneuver how they're going to cover guys. We continue to say, again, it's not result based, although there are some things that we've gotten corrected in every area where it's a blocking scheme, a route, how the guys are running the routes, how we're looking at reading routes, our progressions in the plays, then where the checkdowns are, all of that. I think it's really good when we're able to look at it like that and not, oh, I got sacked, next play. So again, you know, a lot of times when, you know, as reporters, media, when we're looking at it, we're like, all right, this play ended up with the Christian Wilkins sack or Jalen Phillips sack or a completion to Tyreek Hill. But they're kind of looking at it with a more, you know, broadened lens, you know, the entirety of the play, making sure that everyone's in the right spot. Everyone's executing, all 11 guys are executing it. I think that's a fair way to look at it. Because again, I think it's not, obviously it's fun to jot down like this guy's standing out or this guy's maybe struggling, but it's a little bit more than that. Like it's an entire team. So the focus isn't really so much on one player as it is the entire team and all of them working cohesively. What did you kind of make of those comments? Because I thought that was interesting.
Well, no, that I mean that's what training camp is. Everybody's trying to work on something different, and you're you're trying to work on so much in every play. Like Tua said, okay, what happens if the play breaks down? What happens if I have to move out, to my left? What happens if I have to move out to my right?
Mhm.
What happens, you know, what adjustments are supposed to be made offensively? What adjustments are supposed to be made defensively?
Yeah.
You know, they have to, defense, we often focus on the offense. But the defense also has to work on, okay, what happens? What do we do when, things break down for us? And so there are times where, we'll look at, obviously you'll look at, and the passing plays are obviously the easiest ones to, kind of look at, because your runs, you're like, okay, would that have
It's
been a
like, yeah, would that have been a 5 yard run
tackle?
or a 3 yard run, or would he
Would
got a
that
little bit
would
more?
he have broken out of that tackle behind the line of scrimmage and made something out of that? But I saw some plays the other day, and you see them all the time where, okay, somebody breaks through and you're like, okay, that probably would have been a sack. Okay, but they continued on with the play, and there was a completion made, I remember, on the sidelines. I can't remember who, wide receiver, made a nice catch in the boundary. That is, so I'm sure, to us, we look at it, okay, that would have been a sack.
You're kind of getting
But
the best
to
of both
them,
worlds. When yeah,
then they're saying, hey, okay, we may, but we know what we're doing, and we still had a chance to make something out of it. That play could have still been something if it had been a real game.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's completely fair, and it's one of the reasons why training camp, uh, even for even for the people who've watched a whole lot of training camps, 20 years of training camps, 30 years of training camps, some of the people out there. Um, I think as a Bo camper out there, so we're talking 40 something years of training camps he's seen or been a part of. You're still it's still hard to really tell sometimes, make a great assessment of what you're seeing, because you're not entirely privy to what they're trying to do.
And I mean, it's kind of like I kind of equate it to a game, but even having less information than a game. Because at least
Yeah,
when watching a game, at least sometimes you get replays, but a lot of times it's very fast pacing. It is tough to say. I mean, even a lot of the situational stuff they do, like sometimes you might see a short pass, but it's like, all right, they were doing red zone third down drill, so what might not look like a successful play is a successful play.
right.
And to his comments kind of mirror a lot of the stuff that I've heard from Mike McDaniel about, being process oriented over results oriented. Now, that's not to say that the results aren't important, but if you focus in on the process and making sure that the alignment is right and the execution from snap is right, that's when the results will follow. So even if talking to a lot of defensive players, they'll kind of downplay the extent of their success as well, and they'll say, hey, we still got some stuff that we got to clean up in terms of our process and the way we execute some things as well. So again, I mean, this ebb and flow up and down. I mean, I think it's good. Like I think it's best. Obviously, I think a lot of people would agree it's best when it's not just one side of the unit dominating. And again, just because we don't see the long passes and all that doesn't mean that we're not seeing kind of good work being conducted from both sides of the ball. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, I know we discussed this a little bit last week as we previewed training camp. But Tua, for the first time, was asked whether he thought he needed to play in the preseason, whether he wanted to play in the preseason. He had some interesting comments. He only, and just for a reminder, he only played in one preseason game last year. This is before all the concussion issues and whatnot. The Dolphins had a set of joint practices, a pair of joint practices last year. And Tua, I believe it was with the Eagles and the Buccaneers. So he had first set with the Buccaneers before the preseason opener, and then they had another set of joint practices with the Eagles before their preseason finale, and then Tua played one series in that Eagles game. But asked whether he thought he needed to play in the preseason, Tua said that, it didn't really matter either way to him. The exact quote is, I think whatever work we need as an offense, whatever Mike thinks we need, I'm for it. If whether I play in all the preseason games, I play in none, I play in one, it doesn't matter to me. Now, I would say in this instance, and we mentioned this again before, but I think the Dolphins kind of face a little bit more of a decision with Tua, maybe compared to other quarterbacks in other years. More teams are increasingly keeping their starters and key players out. But there is a fair question. The last time Tua got live game reps was Christmas Day. That was the game where he was later diagnosed with the second concussion, effectively shut down for the rest of the year, did not play again. So it's been, off the top of my head, 8 months or so since we've seen Tua on the field, and obviously
that's 7+, but
yeah, 7+. But I mean, we haven't seen him for
next time.
off the top of my head, right is my specialty, not counting.
Counting the months is tough, I know.
Yeah, but we haven't seen him for 7+ months. He said that he's most likely going to wear the new quarterback specific helmet that the NFL and their team and their doctors created in order to help prevent head injuries. He's been wearing that since the spring. He said he's probably going to go with it. He said it's a little, like a percentage safer than the helmet he's been wearing. So I feel like it'd be good to get him in there. I mentioned it before, but especially now that he's wearing this helmet, he hasn't really taken a lot of hits. He kind of joked about a hit that he took in spring where he did a somersault, and he was like, "That's the first time I did that." I feel like it'd be beneficial, even if he looks good in joint practices, which is the reason why he didn't play much in the preseason last year. I think just to kind of get back in the groove, especially for a guy like all of these guys haven't played for several months, but Tua specifically, and given the nature of his injury history, I think it'd be good for him to get those live reps. Like we saw how he was coming back after, I believe it was a 2-3 game absence from the first concussion. And he was a little bit rusty in the Pittsburgh Steelers game. And he mentioned how he kind of needed to go out there and take that hit. I think he lowered his shoulder into a defender, and everyone was kind of held their breath for a moment. But he said, like, I needed that. Like, he told him, like, I needed that. I think it'd be good to get him out there for a series or two, whether it's first, second, third. Honestly, just to kind of feel the bodies around him. And if he does get hit, just kind of know that, all right, he can take the hit. He has the new helmet. He has the jiu-jitsu training. Maybe kind of put that into practice, but just kind of feel a little more comfortable before you kind of throw him out for the live bullets in the season opener.
Yeah, I think we talked last week. I mean, it doesn't need to be a lot, but he has to play. He has to play. I don't think you can have your first real action, since Christmas Day. By that point, it will be over 8 months, and it's 8 months because of an injury, and there's a question about how well you're going to come back from this injury. There's, and no matter how he says it, there's a question in his head.
Yeah.
How well he's going to come back from his.
It's more mental than physical, honestly. I know I mentioned that he might take a hit, but it's more mental, just to be like, all right, I can do this. I'm out here and I've done it.
And so, he needs to play. Like I said, I stay with what I said last week. Go into the game plan in 2 possessions. He walks the offense down the field. They score.
It's like, all right, pat on the back, get the baseball cap.
Thank you very much. Good night. And maybe I think you should do that first preseason game, maybe second preseason game. Same plan. And then third preseason game, you're trying to decide the roster, the bottom of the roster, and looking for people to impress you there. So he doesn't need to be part of that. Because the other side got guys running around out there, half cock crazy. You don't need him out there with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think he has to play. And I think it'll be good for him. I think it'll be good for everybody. Of course, if he gets, hit, bell rung, and he's, out for 6 weeks,
everyone's going to tell it's a terrible. Everyone's going to say it's a terrible decision. But
right. But then you got to sit there and say, okay, fine, but obviously this could have happened.
Yeah.
A couple weeks.
And Tua's credit, I mean, he said football is a freaky, like he said several times, he's like, God willing, like who knows what's going to happen when you go on the football field. He said, football, crazy, freaky things happen. He's like, he even mentioned like, and truthfully, like listening to him speak after practice on Tuesday, he seemed, I don't want to say hesitant to wear the helmet, but it doesn't seem like something that he I would say went out of his way to kind of, I don't know. I don't think the decision was made, on his own to wear that helmet. Like he seemed kind of reserved about it. Like it seemed like he kind of has reservations about it. Like, hey, the helmet that I have has been very highly rated by the NFL too, but they say this one is a little bit of a fraction of a percentage better. So, we're going to try that and see how it works. And even went out of his way to say, hey, it's not that, people are smacking me upside the head. It's, that I'm falling and then hitting my head. So, I understand where he's coming from, but obviously if the NFL says that this is a helmet that, has a even greater chance of helping prevent concussions, I think it's prudent and it's wise, again, to exercise all efforts. He's done everything right and everything he can to try to make sure that he puts himself in the best position to stay healthy, whether it's bulking up, adding some weight, doing jujitsu, and now wearing, what is believed to be safer headwear. All of that, he's doing all the right things.
I wonder how comfortable that helmet is.
It looks kind of big. I'm not gonna lie. It's a bulky helmet. I can imagine aesthetic wise why you might not
I'm not
want
even
it.
thinking aesthetic wise. I'm thinking he's probably, these guys are, very strongly built. Obviously their, necks are strong and everything. But I'm sure if you're used to X kind of helmet,
Yeah, for sure.
X, then a helmet that weighs X plus Y feels like.
I mean, hey, he said he's feeling good with it. He said he's gonna try it out at the beginning of the season and roll with it. Hopefully it does its job. I know, obviously, like I said, it looks a little bulkier. It looks like a little bigger, more padding around the head area. But if it does its job, that's really all that matters. Aesthetics be damned.
Yeah, I don't think the aesthetics are the thing. I really think it's a comfort thing with him. I can't see him being. I mean, I guess I can't see him being that vain that he worries about the helmet like that. Yeah. But I could like a lot of athletes, just like,
they have a certain way of going about things. They wear certain things because they feel comfortable with it.
There are, race car drivers who, I mean, Dale Earnhardt for a year, or you think right to the end, he still wore the kind of helmet you would see more like in the 60s and 70s than, the full thing you would see, in the 80s forward, because that's what he was used to. And yeah. I think, athletes are like that. They like what they're used to. They like what they feel comfortable with. That's what they feel comfortable with. The guys who feel like they have to look good, they're the ones sitting there, making sure everything's just right. And there are the guys who just want to feel comfortable in their padding, in their uniforms. And so yeah, if it feels any different, especially up around the head and neck area, he's like, he's like this, like a kid when you're trying to put the coat on him and they don't want to put the coat on,
athletes are creatures of habit, like you said. They're used to certain things, wearing certain things, but obviously, safety comes first. So, the Dolphins and everyone knocking on wood that, that as well as the other measures help to prevent further injuries. All right, that brings us to the end of another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. I want to thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. Reminder, make sure to subscribe to the Miami Herald YouTube page, like, share, comment, as well as subscribe to the Miami Herald. We got a bunch of new stories on Tua, practice reports, notes from the past few days. Terron Armstead, as we said, returning back to practice. Not sure if he's going to be in the preseason. He's one guy that I'm sure is probably not going to play in the preseason, but he's back. He's back on the practice field. So definitely go to the Miami Herald website and check that out. Check all of our wall-to-wall coverage of training camp. We're going to be back next week. And when we come back next week, we'll be recording fresh off the first set of joint practices with the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta's coming for a couple of days before the preseason opener. We got football coming up. We got the Hall of Fame game. I know it's not. I know you're gonna roll your eyes. You're rolling. It's not real football. But we got the Hall of Fame game this week, and then we got the Dolphins preseason opener next Friday. So we're getting slowly but surely.
The Zach induction is great. Obviously.
Yeah, I was gonna say definitely. I was gonna say go to the Miami Herald website to read Greg Cody's great column on Zach Thomas entering the Hall of Fame. He spoke to media members a couple days as well, and it was a great media session.
This is also going to be It's really interesting Hall of Fame class because you got I feel like they did a lot of making up here. Like, okay,
Yeah,
these are
yeah.
guys that should have been in. Like, we don't know how we know how
We
they.
got to make sure they get them
Yeah,
in.
Zach Thomas, Ken Riley, a cornerback with the Bengals in the 70s. The Bengals problem in the 70s was they were in the same division with the Steelers. Or else you would have heard of a lot of these guys and a lot more, and they would have more Hall of Famers. Ken Riley, he made maybe one Pro Bowl or maybe none. But you always knew he was one of the best cornerbacks in the league. And it was like, how is he not making the Pro Bowl? Well, he had Mel Blount and Willie Brown and those guys in the same conference. But he was a heck of a cornerback. He had like 65 career interceptions. Don Coryell, the architect of what was back then called Air Coryell,
Yep.
he made the Cardinals relevant in the 70s when that division was dominated by Dallas and Washington. The Cardinals came up and won 2 straight division titles. Then he went to San Diego, and that Air Coryell offense is the basis for so much of what you still see today in the NFL. Basically, between Bill Walsh and the West Coast offense and Don Coryell and his offense, but between those two offenses, that occupies pretty much everything the NFL's done offensively. Trace it for the last 40 some years, traces back to those two guys.
Yeah.
There's obviously Joe Thomas. I think Cleveland. Poor
Cleveland
guy.
Browns. Yeah.
His whole career on a terrible Cleveland team.
But one of the best without a doubt. I mean, that
Yeah,
speaks that he was on a terrible teams,
everybody
and he
knew
was
he was one of
no
the
doubt
best.
Hall of Fame. Yeah.
He was no doubt. He was one of the best. There was like everybody was like, "Dang, that's a
We got
shame."
Darrell Revis, who it's kind of cool. Like now, some of the inductees are guys who I like definitely watched in the prime. Like I remember Revis Island.
Oh yeah,
I was younger. Just really like clamping down a whole half of the field. One of the best man-to-man corners we've ever seen.
and also Joe. I mean, Joe Klecko is finally getting in. He was amazing. I hate that word amazing. It's overused, but he was a tremendous player for that New York Sack Exchange in the late 70s, early 80s, the Jets line, even before they got Gastineau and Martin Lyons, and they became a really good pass rush unit. He messed everybody. He messed you up and inside. He was really problematic. I think he was one of those guys when I think Marino was asked about like the best guys you played, your toughest opponents. And, he's like, oh yeah, Bruce Smith, Claiborne, Klecko. And, he was one of the toughest guys out there, played through incredible injuries. You couldn't get him off the field. And so, yeah, feels like there's a lot of, and then there's Zach, who was such a good linebacker for so long. He gave the best quarterbacks the era major problems. And so now, and he's, was kind of denied the Hall of Fame. I think it's like 10 years.
A decade.
Yeah. That's kind of jarring to me. As I remember when he retired, it was like, okay, he'll be in the Hall of Fame soon. So yeah, it feels like a lot of made up, and especially because Ken Riley and Don Coryell have passed on, and but it's good that they get their props and they're in the Hall of Fame where I think they belong. I don't see those as makeup calls or anything, and that's just getting it right,
deserving guys,
and getting it right. So. Yeah, I mean that's gonna be a cool thing about Hall of Fame weekend, and then the game's gonna be kind of interesting for a few series, and then is the longer you cover this league, the more you're gonna the shorter the preseason games get interesting to you.
But it's real football nonetheless, and like you said, Hall of Fame weekend is definitely a treat. I went to the Pro Football Hall of Fame when I was probably in 6th grade, so several years ago. That's a really cool experience, and obviously the Dolphins are going to be represented with Zach. He's going to be speaking first. He said during his media session, I don't know how I'm going to get through it without crying. I'm going to definitely be shedding some tears, a couple times. So well-deserved honor, and it's going to be awesome to see him kind of kick things off with this speech. So we'll definitely be watching that, and we'll be back next week on the Dolphins In Depth podcast to talk all things Dolphins some more. Until then, you guys take care. See you.
Kai out.